Hello everyone and welcome to the Utah Fishing Channel. This is episode 1 of Teach a Kid to Fish. There will be more episodes coming. In this episode I'm going to talk about the first and, in my opinion, most important step in teaching kids how to fish and getting them to like fishing for that matter. It doesn't matter what age your kids are, it's my opinion that the most important step in getting your kids to love fishing is to have them actually fight a fish on a rod. So before you buy all the gear, before you try to go get them into casting or to fly fishing or anything else, you need to let them feel what it's like to catch a fish as soon as you can. Now, if you have little kids, you probably know this already, but you won't have a ton of time before they lose focus when you start going on your fishing trips. And I'll probably do another video about the length of fishing trips with young kids. Now, if you're anything like me when I was first starting out, you're probably thinking, I can barely catch a fish myself. How am I supposed to help my kids catch a fish? Well, in this video, I'll teach you how you can almost guarantee that your kids will catch a fish in their first few trips, if not their very first trip. One of the first things you can do to help guarantee that your kids will catch a fish and quickly on one of the first trips that you take them on is to call your state Department of Wildlife Resources and ask them, where in this state can I take kids and catch a fish almost every time I go? Now, I know for Utah, there are several places like this where if you go with your kids and you bring the right stuff, you can almost guarantee you'll catch a fish every time you go. I don't know for every other state where those places are, so call your Department of Wildlife Resources or go to a fly shop or go to any kind of fishing shop, a bait shop, and just ask them where the fishing is really hot. Once you have a good spot to go, the next thing I would suggest you do is just swallow your pride and accept the fact that bait is more effective than lures or flies or anything else most of the time. So as much as I hate fishing with these things myself, when I take my kids, we bring power bait. Garlic scented is what I find is the most effective for trout. We bring bread dough, which also works really well for trout, and I've even caught bass and carp and other fish on bread. Rod, tip up. You got this, man. Oh, he's doing another run. Dude, what do you think? What do you think? You got him. This guy is big. Another 25-inch catfish. Another really effective bait is Velveeta cheese. Surprisingly, that works really well. Stocked fish in ponds come onto that really quickly. And then, of course, you have the classic one, the worm. Now, you want to make sure that bait is legal wherever you're fishing and that these types of bait are legal wherever you're fishing. But those 4 baits are kind of my go-to. There's nothing exciting about them. You just kind of cast it out there. You let it sit on the bottom of the lake. Usually you want it to be floating 2 or 3 inches off the bottom of the lake. So I put a little split shot on there and then floats a little bit. My second approach would be to put it about 2 feet, maybe 3 feet under a bobber. Cast it out there for your kids. And then just let the poles sit until you see the bobber moving or until you see the pole start moving a little bit. Then you can go over and set the hook for your kids. Once the hook is set, hand the pole to your kid and let them start reeling in that fish. And it doesn't matter if it gets off. All that matters is that they feel what it's like to fight a fish on a rod. This is almost always the point where they decide they like fishing, when they're fighting a fish, especially if it's a big fish on a rod. The nice thing about fishing with bait is you might have a little bit more time fishing because you're not worried about tangling lines, you're not worried about casting, you're not trying to get fishing in yourself either. You just cast the line out, let it sit, and then you and your kids can, look under rocks for bugs on the shore. You can run around, you can bring a ball and throw it to each other. Just make sure your pole is propped up in a place where the fish are not going to take it into the water if they're big enough, and leave it where you can see if a fish is biting. Now, one downside to this method of fishing is if you can't get to the pole fast enough, sometimes the fish will swallow the hook. And if you try to just, yank the hook out of its gut, you're going to kill the fish. So know that if the hook is anywhere behind the tongue of the fish, I would just cut the line. The fish can get the hook out fairly easily on its own. It actually works its way out in just a few days. If that does happen, don't feel too bad. Just cut the line, get the fish back in the water as fast as possible, or if you're keeping it, doesn't really matter. So that's step one to getting kids, or really anyone, into fishing, is to have them actually catch a fish. Go out there and give it a try. If you have more questions about how to get kids into fishing, how to teach them how to fish, feel free to come back for step 2 or video 2 of teaching kids how to fish. Hopefully we'll be up within the next couple of weeks. If you found this video helpful, please subscribe, like the video. We'd love to have you join the community.